They don't fear the loudest voice in the room, fear the one who speaks last, or not at all. There's a certain kind of person who doesn't need attention to command it. When they walk into a space, the atmosphere tightens almost imperceptibly. But undeniably, it's not because they're famous and not because they're violent. It's because their presence carries a quiet warning, a subtle signal, kind of gravitational force that shifts the air around them. These are not people who chase approval. They don't try to justify their existence or explain their decisions. They never need to raise their voice because what they possess is far more potent than noise. They carry within them the most dangerous weapon a human being can possess, a mind that cannot be manipulated, a mind that stands still while others scatter. Have you noticed what happens when you begin to truly change? When you grow, calmer, clearer, and less available to the chaos. The people around you shift. Some fidget, others laugh nervously. They offer false concern masked as curiosity. But deep down they aren't confused. They're afraid. Afraid not of your anger, but of your clarity. It's not of what you say, but of what you no longer find necessary to explain. You've stopped justifying your silence. You've stopped seeking validation. You no longer need to be liked. And that by itself is terrifying because you've tapped into something they've spent their whole lives avoiding: truth and self-mastery. Not power over others, but power over yourself. You no longer crave to be chosen. You no longer beg to belong. And that emotional cage they're still trapped in, you've already walked out of it without making a sound, Machiavelli once wrote. The predictable man is the controllable man. Nature warned, the free mind will always be alone, but it cannot be conquered. These are not mere quotes, they are truths buried in plain sight. Understand this, the world does not reward independence, it rewards obedience. It is built to keep you comfortable, agreeable, compliant, but once in a while, someone breaks that mold. Someone chooses discipline over comfort, stillness over applause, detachment over validation. And if you're still watching this, maybe, just maybe, you are one of them. This is how you build a mind that terrifies, not with noise, not with fury, but with a calm, quiet certainty that you no longer belong to anyone. And that is precisely what makes you untouchable. Weak men react, strong men respond, but truly terrifying men, they wait. They allow the storm to rage. They remain still while others unravel. They observe every word, every shift, every hidden motive, and only then do they decide calmly, precisely. In war, in business, in love, the one who loses control first loses power. It's not rage that makes you formidable. It's the ability to hold that rage back, like a blade that remains sheathed until the outcome is already sealed. Because here's the truth. When emotion takes the wheel, you're not in control. You're being played. The world is full of triggers: a casual insult, a backhanded compliment, a crisis carefully manufactured to make you flinched, to make you react. Because the moment you react, you're exposed. And the exposed man becomes the predictable man. The predictable man is the easiest to control. A strong mind doesn't suppress emotions. It studies them like a scientist observes a specimen. Pain turns into data. Jealousy becomes a mirror reflecting something hidden within. Anger transforms into a calculated tool, a form of leverage rather than an outburst. You no longer say, "I feel this way." Instead, you simply say, "Interesting." Then you track where that feeling leads. Machiavelli would remind you, never show your true emotions in public. Never let them know what shakes you. Why? Because perception bends reality. Silence true. Controlled silence is often more unnerving than any explanation. The most dangerous man in the room isn't shouting. He isn't pacing. He isn't reacting at all. He's still, observing, calculating, untouched by the chaos around him. Why? Because he possesses what few others do: strategic delay. He does not waste energy defending his ego, doesn't seek closure. He does not beg to be understood. He is not impulsive. He is surgical. He's already learned the truth. Not every provocation warrants a response. Not every tear signifies innocence. Not every burst of anger deserves to be released. In fact, the stronger the emotion, the deeper the pause must be. Pause before you speak, before you decide. Pause before you strike not from fear, but from absolute control, because in that pause you take back the power. In a world addicted to immediate reaction, real power becomes the rarest drug of all. Make no mistake, emotional control. Not the absence of feeling. It's not numbness. It is movement without being manipulated. It is action without being enslaved by reaction. The greatest warriors throughout history, the men who shifted empires, they weren't the loudest in the halls. They were the coldest in battle. Cruel, not heartless, but composed, buried. Comrades without breaking down. They faced betrayal without flinching. They sat across from enemies with a calm so sharp it cut deeper than any sword. That calm, it wasn't silence. It was psychological warfare. You don't have to be ruthless. But you must know the cost of losing control. Because every time you crack, someone else claims the power you gave up. And this is where your transformation begins. If you want a mind that terrifies not through noise, but with unshakable presence, you must be the one who never cracks, the one who never flinches, the one who, by simply staying still, causes others to question their own stability. Train your emotions to report to you, not to command you. So the next time you're insulted, pause. Don't defend. Don't explain. Don't retaliate. Smile. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let their imagination turn against them, because fear grows in silence. In silence, when wielded with precision, is the first real act of psychological warfare. So ask yourself, can you hold the silence? Can you stay in discomfort without twitching? Can you stare into chaos and not blink? If you can, you're already rising above the average.
Guys!
While average men seek comfort, unbreakable men seek clarity. And clarity begins with control. You will never be powerful as long as you still need something from anyone. The ... the moment you need to be liked, you've surrendered leverage. The instant you crave to be understood, you've handed over your strings. And the second you seek their validation, you've already forfeited your presence before you even step into the room. Let's get something very clear. Neediness is not emotional honesty. It is emotional dependence. Dependence is the perfect breeding ground for control, but not control by you. Detachment is the antidote, not coldness, not apathy, but full spectrum, psychological detachment. What does that mean, really? Means you no longer wait for permission to be yourself. You no longer shrink your power to make fragile people feel safe. You stop editing your presence to fit in. Stop over-explaining your soul just to feel temporarily accepted. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want to truly understand you. They want you to make them feel unthreatened. They want you to dim your light so they don't have to confront their shadows. And if your clarity makes them uneasy, if your strength exposes their excuses, they will call you arrogant. They will label you distant, cold, emotionally unavailable. Let them. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting the mirror your presence holds up to them. What they see reflected is everything they've tried to escape the truth of who they could be, but chose not to become. You weren't born to be liked. You were born to master yourself. Mastery begins the exact moment you stop negotiating your existence. Think about it. Who do we really respect in this world? It's never the one who folds just to fit in. It's the one who stands firm, even when misunderstood. The one who refuses to shrink, even when they are overlooked. The one who speaks from clarity, not consensus. It's the one who walks away the second neediness pollutes the air. Detachment is not an escape plan. It's not ghosting. It's not disappearing in anger or running from confrontation. It's presence without performance. It's boundaries that require no explanation. It's the ability to leave a room, a relationship, a dynamic without dragging your dignity behind you. Because the moment someone demands an explanation for your standards, they've already disrespected them. Detachment means walking into a space full of hidden agendas, power games, fake smiles, and ego contests, and remaining absolutely unmoved. You're not there to be liked. You're not there to win their favor. You're there to see, to influence, to shift the dynamic of the room not by force, but by simply being. And here's the paradox. The less you need, the more they chase. The less you explain, the more they obsess. The less predictable you become, the more they project power onto you. Why? Because human beings fear what they can't decode. And the man who needs nothing becomes impossible to define, impossible to control, impossible to contain. Let them guess. Let them overthink your silence. Let them wonder why you're not replying, why your distance feels heavier than confrontation, why you don't chase, explain, or apologize. Let them drown in the stories they create around your absence. This is what Machiavelli meant by silent dominance, not brute force, not manipulation, gravity. You don't chase attention. Command orbits. Because while most people trade their power away for the illusion of being seen, you must become the exception. You must embrace invisibility until visibility serves your purpose. That's the principle. You don't exist to be seen. You exist to be effective. More often than not, those two things are worlds apart. The louder the presence, the weaker the intent. But when your mission is real, silence becomes your sharpest tool. Because the moment you stop explaining, the world is forced to interpret your silence. And slowly, it begins to adapt to it. In that silence where, once needs screamed for recognitions, something rare begins to emerge. Presence. Not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that settles in the room like gravity. Not loud, not needy, but undeniable. A presence that doesn't provoke fear through threats or fury, but through quiet certainty. The kind of presence that comes from someone who no longer waits to be chosen because they have already chosen themselves. And that, more than anything, is what people fear, not loneliness, not being alone. What terrifies them is the moment the audience disappears, when no one's watching and the mask slips, and there's no applause to chase, no mirror to perform for. Something raw begins to surface, the self they've buried, the silence they've escaped. That's why true solitude, not isolation, not abandonment, but chosen separation, is sacred to the strong and unbearable to the weak. Because solitude removes the performance, strips away the applause, the distractions, the endless scroll of shallow validation and fleeting dopamine. Most minds can't bear that kind of stillness. They crave noise, crave input, crave anything but their own thoughts. They drown themselves in conversations that mean nothing, in digital screens that never blink, in endless motion that leads nowhere. Because when silence stretches too long, it begins to echo. And in that echo, something uncomfortable rises to the surface, their own voice. But the terrifying mind, the one that commands respect without ever needing to raise, it doesn't run from that voice. It sharpens it, listens deeply, like a craftsman studying the grain of the blade. It moves through the world without needing approval, because it has replaced echo with clarity. Solitude is not absence. It's not emptiness. It's the purest form of presence without dependency. It's the psychological forge where false identities disintegrate, where inherited beliefs decay, like rust. It's where you stop being what the world taught you to be. Start becoming who you were before the world intervened. Nature called this transformation the death of God, not to destroy faith, but to destroy dependence, to tear away every borrowed meaning until nothing remains but the raw edge of who you truly are. Nietzsche wrote of this as a brutal awakening, because only in that abyss, when all comforts have been burned away, can the real self begin to rise, and it is within. This psychological desert, this barren, unfiltered, unforgiving space that your edge is formed. Your clarity, your discipline, your danger. Here's what no one tells you. You don't become unbreakable by being celebrated. You become unbreakable when you sit alone in your thoughts and do not collapse. When you face your mind without flinching, when you let the silence stretch and refuse to fill it. That's why most people fear solitude. It removes the buffer. There are no distractions left to hide behind. No noise, no applause, no one else to blame. It's just you and the weight of your own mind. And if that mind is weak, it folds. But if you stay, If you remain in that stillness, if you listen to the voice in the dark instead of running from it, something shifts. You begin to think more clearly, to fail more deeply, to choose more precisely, to act with clean, unwavering intent. Because solitude destroys the performance, and what remains after the performance dies is what's real. And real is rare. Every man who has ever bent the world to his will, every strategist, every leader, every sovereign soul walked alone first. Alone with his demons, alone with his doubts, alone in the cold, ruthless silence where excuses cannot survive. You want to know why most men stay average? It's not because they lack strength. It's because they can't sit still. They can't bear the quiet. They mistake silence for emptiness, stillness for weakness. But the terrifying mind knows the truth. Silence is leverage. Because the quieter you become, the more power you gain, not through volume, but through awareness. In that stillness, you begin to observe the subtle details others are too distracted to notice. The tension in their jaw when they lie. The shift in tone. When their confidence breaks, the way their eyes scan the room for approval, silence turns into strategy. Every word they overuse, every fidget, every nervous laugh, it becomes data. The moment someone tries to dominate the conversation, you're not caught off guard. We're already 3 steps ahead. Why? Because you're not speaking to be heard. You're listening to what they're not saying. When they ramble, you say nothing. When they rush, you remain still. While they scramble for control, you are already positioning yourself with intention. And when the time comes to respond, don't explode, you execute. With clarity, with precision, with a kind of still fury that was only possible because you trained in silence. Because solitude is not exile. It's not punishment. It's preparation. A mental forge, okay? Personal dojo where focus is built and distractions are killed. It is the sacred space where presence is carved out, one thought at a time. The man who is trained in that quiet space walks into any room without fear because he knows he was never really alone. That is exactly why they begin to fear you when you become at ease in your own solitude. Because suddenly, you're no longer dependent on their attention. Their presence no longer defines your worth. Their absence no longer cripples your identity. You're no longer begging to be noticed. You're choosing to observe, to build, to move with deliberate control. You no longer depend. You decide. You watch. You gather. Construct something unshakable. Because the mind that terrifies doesn't shout. It waits. It measures. It grounds itself in patience, discipline, and presence. It became terrifying not by chaos, but by doing what fragile men fear most. Being alone and not collapsing under the weight of that silence, to be unseen. And still sharpen the blade. To remain unacknowledged and yet grow sharper. To hold silence until it grows fangs. That's not loneliness. That is power pure, distilled, and untamed. The mind that terrifies doesn't enter battles recklessly. It watches as others lose themselves. In noise and emotion, it lets their instability expose itself. And when the moment is right, it acts, not with drama, but with devastating accuracy. The strongest weapon is not noise. It is perception. It's the ability to see what others can't admit. And here's the truth few understand. Human nature isn't a mystery. It's a code. And that code is simple: fear, desire, insecurity, and the need for significance. These are the forces pulling the strings behind nearly every action. Learn to read those forces. Listen not only to their words, but to the hesitation between them. Notice the breath they hold when they feel challenged. The glance that lingers too long, at the silence they stumble to fill. Most people speak quickly not from confidence, but from fear, because silence feels like exposure. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's pressure. He saw that people betray themselves not when they're silent, but when they talk too much, when they over-explain, reveal almost nothing. When they ask you about your plans, give them fog, not clarity. When they insult you, show no reaction. When they brag about themselves, Simply smile and nod. Because here's the rule. The louder they become, the more you learn. And that's the first rule of psychological warfare. Let them tell you who they are. You don't need to interrogate. You don't have to force. Just observe quietly, patiently like a wolf, listening for weakness in the herd. The truth always leaks from the unguarded. The insecure reveal themselves not in silence, but in their need to fill it. But here's the twist most people miss. This awareness. Its power isn't meant to be wielded carelessly. You don't use it to dominate every room or crush every ego. You use it wisely, to protect your energy, to conserve your strength, to walk away from pointless battles. Why exhaust yourself proving something to someone who's already afraid? Because the moment you understand someone's fear, the game changes. You no longer need to threaten. You don't need to raise your voice or clench your fists. Sometimes all it takes is a glance, pause, an intentional silence. The subtle suggestion of what they already fear becomes more powerful than any overt confrontation. And that's the secret. People don't fear direct conflict nearly as much as they fear uncertainty. So become that uncertainty. Be unreadable. Let your presence raise questions, not answers. When they expect you to speak, remain still. When they wait for clarity, offer none. Never make your motives obvious. Never show your full hand. Never expose the emotional core that others would exploit. Because once they know what disturbs you, it's about seeing 5 moves ahead, not because you're lucky, but because you stopped playing checkers and started designing the chessboard. You built the rules while they were still memorizing them. So what should you do? Let it make them uncomfortable. Observe what happens in that discomfort. Watch how their truths emerge, how their defense mechanisms activate. Learn to study emotional currency. What do they fear? What do they crave? What are they pretending not to want? Hide your reactions. Ask questions not to get answers, but to study the lies behind those answers. And when you speak, speak like a scalpel, not like a sledgehammer. Precise, measured, intentional. Never explain more than necessary. Your mystery is your weapon. Let your unpredictability become your shadow, your calm become your legend. Let your silence become the loudest tension in the room. Because the terrifying mind, it doesn't argue. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for understanding. And it simply watches while others unravel, trying to figure it out. Trying to decode the silence. You don't have to be the smartest man in the room. You just have to be the most controlled, the most quietly dangerous. Because while everyone else is playing emotional roulette, you're holding the blueprint to the machine. They think power is visibility. They chase titles, applause, validation. They think strength is loud, draped in appearances and decoration. It's built in early mornings no one witnesses. In lonely decisions, no one applauds. In sacrifices, no one understands. The most powerful minds, they don't showcase their struggle. They don't seek recognition for their consistency. Train like ghosts. No slogans, no quotes. No self-congratulation, just repetition. Just discipline. The hard thing done again and again. Until it becomes as natural as breathing. Because here's something most will never understand. He rises because he said he would. He doesn't broadcast his pain. He doesn't wait to feel ready, he acts. Because readiness is a myth, but consistency is real. Motivation? It fades. But discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It only asks one thing. Will you act even when your soul says no? Because the terrifying mind already knows the answer to that question. And that's why. Fatigue, rejection, and fear, they lose their grip. Most men don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they wait. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect mindset, the perfect permission to act. But perfection, it's a liar, a mirage. On the road to greatness and comfort is more dangerous than any enemy. It's slow, seductive death. It doesn't kill you with violence, it erodes you. It whispers, rest a little longer, as it dulls your sharpness, your edge, your hunger. But discipline, real discipline, is something else entirely. Discipline is waking up when you're exhausted. It's showing up when you'd rather disappear. It's pushing forward when no one notices and no one claps. You finish the work not because you're excited, but because you promised yourself you would. You begin not because you feel ready, but because you know readiness is irrelevant. This path is not about feeling good. It's about becoming undeniable. You see, Machiavelli wouldn't have called this discipline. Call it control, a deeper, more dangerous version of self-mastery. Because when you control yourself, nothing external can command you. The battlefield isn't your job, your status, or your critics. The true war? It's internal. It's fought in the quiet moments when you decide to push forward, while everything in you screams to quit. The real enemy isn't your past. It's not. The system. It's your inconsistency. It's that aching need to be seen before you've actually become anything. That obsession with praise before you've paid the price. The desire for the outcome, but none of the sacrifice. But here's where the shift begins. Every hard decision made in silence is an investment in something the loud will never understand. Presence. Not the fake confidence of performance, but the weight of someone who is paid in full. Presence is not created in the spotlight. It's built behind closed doors. It's carved out in silence, in the repetition no one sees. It lives in the early morning sweat, the late night rewrite, the quiet, lonely yes to the harder path. Presence is built when no one claps, and when your body screams for the exit. When every excuse feels valid, and every shortcut seems reasonable, you stay and you build. Not for attention, not for applause, but for the structure. Because the terrifying mind doesn't chase image, it builds foundation. It builds a rhythm, a discipline, a legacy that no storm can shake. It knows that reputation isn't claimed, it's revealed, and only under pressure. So stop asking, how do I become impressive? Start asking, how do I become unshakable? And then go earn that answer, not loudly, but relentlessly, every day, quietly, without validation, without reward. Not because it feels good, because the mission requires it. Because every silent decision, every unseen sacrifice, every yes to pain and no to EZOs are votes for the man you're becoming. And one day, without warning, you'll walk into a room, and it will shift. Not because you spoke, not because you demanded it, but because the air itself knows who you are. The room will sense your discipline, your clarity, your edge. They won't know what you've done, they won't see the miles, the scars, or the hours, but they'll feel it. The storm behind your calm, tension wrapped in your stillness. Because when you've trained in private, you stop needing to prove anything in public. You walk in, and the world adjusts. Power rarely comes from who you truly are. It comes from what people believe you are. If you don't shape that image, they will invent one for you. It's not in your favor. Here's the uncomfortable truth. No one sees you as you are. They see you through the filter of their fears, their games, their insecurities. So if you leave that perception unshaped, you've already surrendered your power. But the terrifying mind never plays that game blindly. He builds the mask, crafts the mirror. Then he lets the world project itself onto that surface. Not to deceive, but to design. This isn't manipulation. It's a strategy. You don't plead. You don't perform. You simply choose what to show on, what to let them imagine. Because mystery unsettles people, and unsettled people adapt. Every unnecessary word you say softens your presence. It's every time you explain yourself, you give away ground. Every attempt to clear the air only muddies the message you should have left in the silence. So say, less, mean, more. Smile slower. Let silence linger just a little longer than they're comfortable with. Because when others can't fully read you, they can't reduce you. And when they can't reduce you, they elevate you sometimes far beyond what even you intended. That's the mask. It's not fake. It's focused. It's crafted with restraint, shaped by presence and sealed with silence. The mask isn't a disguise. It's a decision. In your silence, they project. In your calm, they create stories. They will fill in your blanks with their imaginations, their insecurities, their fears. They'll assume you're stronger, colder, smarter, more powerful than you actually revealed, not because you told them, precisely because you didn't. and Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote that power lies not in what is revealed, but in what is concealed. What you keep to yourself becomes your leverage. Clarity is for your allies. Ambiguity is for everyone else. There is a psychological edge in withholding. It unsettles. It disturbs. It forces people to reveal themselves before you've even spoken. So learn the art of strategic vagueness. When they ask what you're planning, offer a smile. When they dig for direction, shift the subject. When they try to provoke, stay utterly unshaken. This isn't avoidance, it's mastery. This isn't apathy, it's precision. You're not dodging truth. You're shaping perception. You are controlling the terrain before the battle even begins. Because the battlefield is always perception. And in that space, confidence is not enough. You must also be unreadable. Here's a rule. Never let people feel like they fully understand you. Because once they think they do, they'll either try to control you or worse, they'll stop respecting you. Predictability breeds comfort, but unpredictability, that breeds respect. The man who is unreadable without being chaotic, calm without being soft, silent without being hollow, he becomes the most psychologically dominant force in any room. Because they don't fear anger, they fear what they can't explain. They fear the calm they can't define, the presence they can't label, the silence that may be strategy or something far more dangerous. That's the mask. But what about the mirror? The mirror is what they see in themselves when they look at you. If you're disciplined, they feel lazy. If you're clear, they feel foggy. If you're emotionally detached, they suddenly become aware of the chaos inside themselves. You don't need to attack to shake someone. You simply need to exist as a quiet reflection of what they're not ready to confront. And when that reflection becomes too sharp, they'll do one of two things. They'll rise to meet it, or they'll retreat. They'll call you names. Arrogant, cold, emotionally unavailable. That reaction isn't your responsibility. It's not your burden to soften what they see. That's their mirror cracking. Because you weren't built to comfort mediocrity. You were built to raise the standard without even saying a word. So from this point forward, walk slower. Speak less. Maintain eye contact longer than they can tolerate. Let your silence linger like punctuation, not as a pause, but as a message. Smile not to please, but to confirm what words could never explain. And when you do speak, eliminate the excess. Speak with weight. Be exact. Be deliberate. Because when you control perception, you don't need to ask for respect. You become the atmosphere that demands it. There comes a moment not loud, not dramatic, but sharp, cold, irreversible, when you realize they were never meant to understand you. Far more importantly, you no longer need them to. Death of your own truth, but now no more. Death stops here. Because the terrifying mind, the one they whisper about behind closed doors, the one they secretly admire but can never quite accept, was born the moment you stopped performing. For comfort, that's when everything shifted. When applause stopped mattering and clarity became the only audience worth serving. Understand this. The world will never clap for your clarity. Not really. They'll praise your growth as long as it doesn't shine a light on their stagnation. They'll celebrate your progress till it makes them uncomfortable. But the moment your silence starts echoing louder than their noise, the moment your very presence becomes a mirror, forcing them to confront the parts of themselves they've long avoided. Not because you're wrong, not because you've harmed them, but because you've reminded them of everything they chose to forget, you see. Mediocrity survives by agreement unspoken, subtle, but powerful. A silent pact, we all stay the same, and no one reaches too far. But when you rise, when you quietly, calmly step beyond that agreement, you break that contract. Suddenly, your stillness becomes threatening. Your calm composure starts unraveling their excuses. Your detachment shines a light they can't bear to look into. And that mirror, it burns. They'll call you cold, selfish, difficult. Let them there. Words are not truths. They're confessions, proof of how deeply your strength unsettles them. They don't hate you. They hate what you've become. Proof that more is possible. Proof that comfort is a choice, not a condition. You've done. The unthinkable you stood tall in a world that prefers heads bowed. That quiet discomfort they feel, a distance they can't bridge, that tension in the air when you speak few words but carry full weight, that's the price of sovereignty, true sovereignty. Because once you free yourself from the need to be understood, you become unreachable. They can't insult you, you no longer take things personally. They can't guilt, you've made peace with solitude. They can't cancel you, you never needed their approval in the first place. And this is the secret no one dares to say out loud. They respect it, they feel it, they envy it, because deep down, they wish they could do the same. They wish they could walk away from performance, speak less, stand taller, detach without apology, act without needing applause, but they can't, not yet. They're still addicted to the echo, still terrified of silence, the same silence you now thrive in. So let them talk, let them project, let them distort your name, your intent, your stillness. It means nothing. Their noise holds no weight because you've already crossed the line. And once you've crossed it, there's no going back. Let them call you distant, arrogant, dangerous. Good because they're right, you are dangerous. Not because you seek destruction, but because you no longer seek permission. And a man who doesn't seek permission, he cannot be manipulated. You've become the storm they can't predict, the standard they can't meet, the silence they can't decode, the mirror they can't bear to face. And from this moment forward, you don't explain, you don't chase, you don't prove. You live, you move, you choose, and the world it adjusts. If you've made it here to the end of this video. Through the silence, the solitude, the darkness, then know this, you are not like most. Certainly. Here's the expanded and polished English version of your text. Meeting all your requirements, most people would have clicked away the moment the words became uncomfortable, the moment the truth cut too sharply, the moment the mirror reflected back too clearly. But you didn't, you stayed. Not because this was mere entertainment, but because something deep inside you already knew this was more than content. It was confirmation. Confirmation that your silence, your restraint, your distance were never signs of weakness. Instead, they were preparation. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to wake up. Now that you have, don't fall back asleep. Don't return to endless explanations. Don't crawl back to the approval of those who never truly had the eyes to see you. You have crossed the line. The line between the agreeable and the untouchable, between being understood and being undeniable. The old you was built on compliance. The new you is forged in command. Not loud, not theatrical, not forced, but still sharp and unshaken. Because the terrifying mind doesn't beg to be seen. It chooses when and if to be visible. It doesn't seek to be liked. It seeks to remain untouchable. From this moment forward, you move like a force knot, noisy, but a gravity that pulls everything around you. They won't always understand it, but they will feel it. And that's exactly the point. You didn't build this mind for applause. You built it so no one could ever break you again, so that when the storm comes, you remain still. When the pressure rises, you don't flinch. And when the world shakes, you smile. Because you've trained for this in silence. And now your silence speaks louder than any scream. This is who you are now, not waiting, not pleasing, not explaining. You are unshaken, unmoved, unbreakable.